A Chinese spy balloon has captivated the nation for the last few days. It traveled across the country before the military shot it down off the coast of South Carolina on Saturday.
Well, joining us today is a man qualified to assess this security breach and much more. Former Secretary of State and CIA Director Mike Pompeo. Here's a look at his impressive background.
When it comes to stellar resumes, Mike Pompeo's is hard to beat. First in his class at West Point, a Harvard Law degree, U.S. Congressman, CIA Director, Secretary of State, and quite possibly a presidential candidate in 2024.
You said you're considering it. How close are you to making it?
So as for that, Susan and I are thinking, praying, trying to figure out if this is the next place to go serve, but we haven't come to that conclusion. We'll do so.
But how close are you?
We'll figure this out in the next handful of months.
Ever since leaving the Trump administration, Pompeo has been showing up regularly in key early primary states like Iowa and New Hampshire.
Well, good morning, everyone.
And now he's written the new book, Never Give an Inch, about his time in the White House. The book is no nonsense, just like the author, detailing many of his relationships with heads of state from all around the world, including a surprise interaction with Kim Jong-un of North Korea. As for President Trump, Pompeo writes plenty of kind words, although he dishes criticism toward entrenched Washington bureaucrats and certain former administration officials like John Bolton and Nikki Haley, who's expected to announce her run for the presidency soon. Now, following this new book, attention shifts to the next chapter for Mike Pompeo. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
All right, thank you, David. Well, former Secretary of State and CIA Director Mike Pompeo is with us now. His new book is called Never Give an Inch. I read it cover to cover. It is fascinating, and it's an Amazon and New York Times bestseller. Mr. Secretary, thanks for being with us today.
It's great to be with you this morning. Thank you for having me on.
Well, we're so glad you're here, especially today with all the news going on. Let's start with a Chinese spy balloon. The U.S. military shot it down on Saturday. What's your take on how the Biden administration handled it? And how do you respond to reports that similar balloons flew over portions of the U.S. during the Trump administration?
Well, goodness. First of all, you got it right. It was a spy balloon. We should note that the Chinese say it was a weather balloon. You shouldn't forget they told us that the Wuhan virus wasn't going to spread. It wasn't contagious. They hid everything there, too. They are liars. They are lying about this. This was certainly an effort to collect against important information that America doesn't want in the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. And that leads to your question, which is, I cannot figure out for the life of me why the Biden administration chose to allow this to traverse Alaska down through the United States across significant military installations here in the homeland. They'll have to explain that to the American people. They could have taken this down much earlier. They could have done so with relatively little risk to folks on the ground. I'm confident of that. For some reason, they decided not to until some folks in Montana made it public. My guess is that not happened. They might have let it move out of the United States and never told the American people. And I've seen, too, you're right, I've seen the stories that said this happened on our watch. I can speak to this. I never knew about it. And a balloon the size of 3 buses slowly making its way against our heartland for days. I'm pretty confident the CIA director or the Secretary of State would have been told about. President says he wasn't told. 2 national security advisors said they didn't know. I await anxiously to find out what happened. I hope it's not the case that the military knew and didn't tell its political leadership, but I can certainly say that I know of no one in the administration at the political senior level that was aware of such an action taking place on our watch. We wouldn't have allowed it to happen for 5 days.
All right, well, let's turn to another flashpoint, the Middle East. There's been a surge in Palestinian terrorism against Israel recently, sponsored by Iran. Based upon your years directing the CIA, followed by serving as Secretary of State, how should we deal with Iran's terrorism and their nuclear program?
You know, I spent a lot of time on this issue in Never Give an Inch. We had one good partner, the rightful homeland of the Jewish people, the nation of Israel, and we were locked in. We moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. We acknowledged the Golan Heights for the rightful land of the people of Israel, and then we punished the regime in Iran. And that's what I wish this administration would do, too. You can't appease the Ayatollah. You can't appease President Raisi, who's the butcher of Tehran. These are folks who only know power. And when I see the Biden administration trying to get back into a nuclear deal, which guarantees a pathway to a nuclear weapon for Iran, that is dangerous for Israel. It is dangerous for the people of the United States of America, and it is dangerous for people in the Middle East as well. We built peace on the Abraham Accords. These folks, the Biden administration has now tried to play footsie with the Iranians. That's really not good for America.
Well, you mentioned the Abraham Accords, and in your book, you write with great enthusiasm about them. And toward the end of the book, I took note of this. You said, we've gone from wondering if they would be possible to guessing which Arab country will join next. Why are the Abraham Accords so important to Israel?
Well, they're important to Israel because you now have 4 fewer nations that have as their central thesis of their national security destroying the Zionist project, taking down the nation of Israel. So that's a lot less risk. It's also the case that now the Israelis will trade with them. They'll be security partners with them. Lives will be better for Emiratis and Sudanese and Moroccans and Bahrainis and Israelis. And importantly, Andrew, for the United States, the Abraham Accords demark a moment when the risk that we have to send our young boys and girls to fight and risk their lives in the Middle East is greatly diminished. It was such an important accomplishment. I pray that they will continue and grow. I pray that other nations will join, and they will all come to see Israel as a nation that is noble and important in the world.
Well, you're considering running for president, as we understand, and you'd probably be running against a former administration colleague, Nikki Haley, who you mentioned in your book, and your former boss, President Trump, who used to call you my Mike. Are those factors in your decision?
Goodness, no. The only thing Susan and I are doing is we're praying for discernment and trying to figure out if this is the right place for us to go serve next. There'll be lots of folks that decide to get in the race. There'll be a handful of folks that we think are going to get in that don't, and some that we don't think are going to get in that will. But it won't be about who decides. It will be about making the case to the American people about our vision for America and how it is that if we were given this incredible privilege to serve as president of the United States, how we would work to deliver on their behalf every day.
Well, one thing about your book that struck me, it contains fascinating conversations, confrontations you've had with some of the world's most feared regimes and dictators. So I was surprised, near the last page of your book, you say the greatest overall threat to America is Randi Weingarten, the head of the teachers union. Why her?
If we teach our kids garbage, if we do not remind them that this is a Judeo-Christian nation and is the most exceptional nation in the history of civilization, if we can't teach them the basics of reading and writing and reasoning, if we get those things wrong, Andrew, no Secretary of State can fix that problem. The next generation will grow up thinking, gosh, we were taught America is racist. We were taught America is founded on an illogical idea and there is an oppressor class. You can't get those things back. Xi Jinping's a bad guy. I spent time with him. Chairman Kim, bad guy. I spent time with him. The Taliban, evil. Vladimir Putin, the same. But none of those things pose the same risk that we don't transmit to the next generation, that parents aren't permitted to teach their children their value set, and that our schools screw that up. And Randi Weingarten and the teachers unions are at the center of trying to do that. They closed our schools for 2 years. They present an enormous risk to our republic, and we should push back. Every governor should push back to make sure that their schools, their kindergartens, their first graders, their high school kids are all learning the most important things about this great country.
Well, on a much more positive note, at the beginning of your book, you quote this verse, "Be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong." That's 1 Corinthians 16:13. Why did you choose that verse to open up your book?
It's one that I've read since I came to Christ when I was in college. It's one that we taught our 5th grade Sunday school class when Susan and I taught 5th grade Sunday school back in Wichita. So it was a verse that was on my heart that I know well. And I think it's a message to all of us, and not just senior leaders in America, but everyone who's raising a family, people who are out there struggling, trying to find a way. I hope it offers them encouragement, enlightenment, and that they will go grab the rest of that chapter that tells so many wonderful stories about how it is Jesus expects us to live our lives.
Mr. Secretary, if you run and win the presidency, you'll be going up against the Washington swamp again. What kind of opposition did you run into from the entrenched bureaucracy as CIA director and then Secretary of State?
Oh, goodness. It was tragically difficult at the State Department, less so at the CIA, frankly. They were more like some of the warriors that I knew from my time as a young lieutenant in the United States Army. You point them in the right direction, they'll put a dagger in their mouth and they'll go swim the river and do good things for the country. State Department was a different creature. They had a mind of their own. They were left of center, and they resisted the things that President Trump and I were trying to accomplish. It was there were 3 unions there. It was a difficult leadership challenge for sure when you're meeting that kind of resistance inside the organization that is supposed to work for you. I think I know how to fix it. You have to be able to make decisions based on merit, hiring decisions, promotion decisions, termination decisions, assigning people to the right place that fits their skill set that the Lord has given them. Today, none of that happens inside the State Department. It is a old boys network built on a set of union rules and civil service regulations. That's not good for the country, and we need to fix it. And the next conservative president needs to get after it.
All right, everybody, the book is called Never Give an Inch, and it is a great read. As I said, I read every page, and I encourage you to get a copy. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for being on the 700 Club today.
Andrew, bless you. Thank you for having me on today.